Hi guys, this chapter covers regulation of body temperature and body fluids, and so this has to do with kidneys and peeing, basically. So we're going to go over that today. I'm going to increase the size here again. Sorry about that. I don't have my PowerPoints, but I do have this PDF version, so we're going to have to just make do with what we got. Okay. So animal bodies have to maintain homeostasis. Remember that homeostasis is just the parameters in which a body or an organism functions the best, or that's like basically their rules for life. And so for us, we have a thermostat inside of our bodies that tells us how cold or how hot we are, and we work best at about 98.6 degrees, 98.7 degrees. So different organisms have different temperatures, they have different requirements for how much fluid they need, they have different nutriment requirements, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're also going to talk later about mostly just the human aspect of this. And so for us, our hypothalamus is going to regulate our body temperature by causing us to do different things if we're too hot or too cold. If you're too hot, you start sweating, your blood vessels will dilate, you might move to the shade, you might go find some air conditioning, you might drink a cold beverage, all of those things to help keep your body temperature down. The opposite side of that is if you're too cold, you might put a jacket on, you're going to start shivering, your blood vessels will constrict and try to keep all that warm blood towards the core of your body, and so this all helps to maintain that homeostatic environment for your body that works best at 98.6 degrees. So, as you can imagine, different organisms are going to maintain homeostasis in different ways. So, things like these birds right here, they will do different things in order to maintain their fluid balance and in order to maintain their specific heat requirements. And so, like a penguin, for example, is an Antarctic bird, and so if they get too hot, usually not a problem for them because they live in the Antarctic, but they do different behavioral things to keep warm and to cool off, versus something that lives in like the tropical rainforest, like these rainbow macaws, versus a road runner that's going to do different things. Now, getting hot for this guy is going to be an issue. And so they're going to do different things to kind of maintain that homeostasis differently than we will anyway, and from each other. So the control of your body temperature is called thermoregulation, and so thermo just means temperature, and then being able to regulate that. And so depending on what kind of animal you are, you're going to do that different ways. So some organisms are called ectothermic, which means that they are cold-blooded, meaning that they get their temperature basically from the environment. And so this is going to be all of your invertebrates. That's going to be like your bugs, your mollusks, your arthropods, those kind of things, your fishes, your non-avian reptiles like snakes and lizards and things, and your amphibians. And so those guys are kind of at the mercy of the environment to kind of dictate what their temperature is going to be. Endotherms, on the other hand, they make their own body heat, so that's going to be like your birds and your mammals, so they're warm-blooded. Oh, sorry, I'm still kind of snuffly on here. Let's see. So endotherms, so endo, remember, means inside, and then therm means temperature, so these are inside temperature regulating organisms. They're going to regulate their body temperature internally, and so we generate our own heat, and a lot of that is lost in the environment. That's why mammals and birds need a little bit more caloric intake than like a snake or something, because regulating and producing your own body heat takes a lot of calories, and it takes a lot of energy. So in an endothermic organism, your hypothalamus, again, like we talked about before, is going to detect how hot or cold you are, and then it's going to kind of direct you to do different things based on what your needs are at that moment. So if you're too hot, you're going to start sweating. You might be like, wow, it's hot outside. I think I'll go make myself a nice refreshing glass of iced tea or something like that. If you're too cold, you're going to put on a jacket, you're going to shiver, and all of that, again, is to regulate your body temperature. So ectotherms regulate their body temperature externally, so they don't make their own body heat, and they're kind of like at the whim of the environment as far as keeping their body temperature within that range. And so their range of body temperatures where they're not going to die is a lot larger than that of an endotherm, and that makes sense because they're going to have a much wider range that they're going to be able to work within because they're kind of at the whim of the environment. And so cold-blooded organisms have a much wider range. So their body temperature is going to vary with those external conditions, but they can behaviorally kind of regulate their body temperature by doing certain things. If you guys have ever gone to the desert Southwest, every once in a while you see reptiles and snakes and things outside sunning themselves, and so they're trying to absorb heat from the sun, and that's how they kind of help to regulate their body temperature that way. Rattlesnakes will actually sleep when it's cold outside. They hibernate and they sleep together to help kind of maintain some of that warmth. So those are behavioral ways that they kind of adjust their temperature. So endothermy and ectothermy have both advantages and disadvantages. And so endotherms, they have to maintain that body temperature at all times. And so your range of body temperatures is really narrow. You have to be around that 98.6 degrees, otherwise you are like in a world of hurt. If you've ever had a fever and you're like 103, which is only 4 or 5 degrees above what you normally are, you feel like crap. I mean, like, you really don't feel good. And if you go too much below that 98.6 degrees, you feel like crap too. You get cold, you're shaky, like you just feel like you can't warm up, you stop working efficiently, like you're just kind of worried about keeping warm. And so endotherms, that's kind of their limitation, is that if they get too far outside of that range, they really start to suffer. But one of the benefits of being an endotherm is that they're able to be active at all times of the day because they're not relegated to only being active when the sun is out, so that they can regulate their body heat that way. So ectotherms use way less energy to maintain their body temperature, which is why snakes only really require to eat like maybe once or twice a month. If you've ever kept reptiles or snakes or things like that, you know that you don't have to feed them all the time, every day, all the time, like you do with like a dog or a cat. And that's because they're not using all those calories to burn and create their own body heat. So that's also one advantage of being a ectotherm. So there are some physiological adaptations that help to keep animals warm, so like a countercurrent exchange. You see this in some fishes as well. So the countercurrent exchange, what that is that you basically have your arteries and your veins, and the heat from the arteries will actually kind of transfer over to the veins and help to keep that that blood warm. So that's called that countercurrent exchange. And then you also have excuse me, behavioral adaptations that help you to maintain your body temperature too. These are Japanese macaques, these little guys right here. They huddle together when it's cold outside, and they also go swimming in hot pools, like thermal pools, in the wintertime to help keep them warm. And so those are behavioral adaptations. So they're changing their environment. They're huddling together. They're going to these hot pools in order to keep warm. A dog, that's what they're trying to show you in this picture, is going to like pant and maybe go lay in the shade. And those are behavioral adaptations to help keep their temperature a little bit lower, because in a situation where a dog is panting, they're usually hot. They're trying to cool the blood off inside of their oral cavity by running air over it, and that will cool off their blood so that way they can maintain their body temperature. Okay, remember to look at those clicker questions later, and remember to also look at these mastering concepts questions. These are good study questions, but I'm going to skip over them for now. Alright, so now we're going to talk about body fluid and homeostasis, so how we regulate our water and our salt. This is different depending on what kind of organism you are. As you can imagine, a saltwater fish or a marine fish and a freshwater fish are going to have different ways of doing this, because salt does really weird things to your water balance. And so anyway, all organisms need to regulate their fluid balance, and so this is like taking in water and then also getting rid of water, so being able to pee and get rid of some of that fluid balance, so that way you're not waterlogged all the time. Excuse me. So making urine participates in the regulation of the balance between your salt and the water inside of the body. This is called osmoregulation. That literally just means water regulating. So marine fishes and freshwater fishes are going to do this different ways because of their environment. So marine fishes, they have to drink fresh water. Salt is actually transported to the gills and then diffused out that way, and they produce very, very little urine, and they don't really pee a lot of water in, and it's not lost in their urine because they have to kind of keep that inside because the environment they find themselves in is very salty, and so their problem is maintaining fresh water. Now, freshwater fishes, they don't have to drink fresh water because they are surrounded by it all the time, and they pee out water constantly because they are just surrounded by pee all the time. They're surrounded by fresh water all the time, and so they have to get rid of that water, and so they produce a lot of urine that's very dilute, meaning that there's a lot of water in it. And so for terrestrial organisms, we also have different ways of regulating that fluid balance depending on what kind of organism you are. So kangaroo rats, which are desert-dwelling organisms, they live in the desert southwest. You find species of them over in Asia, and in, I think, like northern Africa, you find like different species of these animals, but they're desert-dwelling organisms, and so they are incredibly good at getting water from their environment and then keeping that water in their system. And so kangaroo rats are actually able, they don't ever have to actually drink liquid water in that form. They get all the water they need from their food. And so they're so good at extracting water from their environment that they don't even have to drink fresh water, and that's because they evolved in the desert. And so because they live in an environment where there's not a ton of water all the time, again, they're really efficient at extracting that water from their food, and they also do not get rid of it very readily, and so they don't put a lot of water in their urine. They do not put a lot of water in their feces. Now, for a human, we evolved in places that also may or may not have had a lot of water, but we have to drink liquid water, and so we get most of our fluid requirement from liquids and solid foods. And so we also, if you guys remember, at the very end of cellular respiration, we do make some water molecules, and so we actually do make a little bit of water because of our cellular respiration, but look where we lose it. We lose it in our urine mostly, and over here, for this desert-dwelling organism, they mostly lose water from their skin and their lungs, and so breathing. So kind of an interesting, and again, this just has to do with where these organisms were evolved from and how they're able to keep their water balance. So one of the other things that your urine does is it gets rid of kind of toxic chemicals that are made from the breakdown of proteins or from other metabolic activities in your body, and one of those things is nitrogenous waste. So, excuse me. So when we break down food from the digestive system, a lot of times we're going to have some things in there that we don't need, and one of those things is that nitrogenous waste. And again, you get that from the breakdown of protein, so like these high protein foods right here, like nuts and cheese and meats and things like that. So we got to get rid of it. And so the way that we do that is that we sequester that ammonia, that nitrogenous waste right here, we sequester that into, depending on what kind of organism you are, you can sequester that into different molecules and then get rid of it in your urine. And so for some organisms, the ammonia, because they live in a water environment, doesn't have to be sequestered. It can just be excreted right into the water column, and so that's going to be like your fishes. Now, for humans, because we're mammals, we like to sequester that ammonia into a molecule that's called urea, and so that's going to be like the yellow part of your urine, that nitrogenous part. And then for birds and some insects, they like to sequester that nitrogen. So see all these nitrogens right here, those nitrogen-containing compounds? They put those into uric acid. So uric acid is what eats the paint off your car when you get a lot of bird crap all over your car. It's this that's actually eating the paint off your car. It's pretty caustic. And so, again, this is getting rid of all that nitrogenous waste that you eat from your diet. And so again, we already kind of talked about this. I'm not going to get into too much more detail, but when you break down those proteins, you're going to get some ammonia, some nitrogen-containing compounds in your bloodstream. And since ammonia, which is the main ingredient in Windex, for those of you that weren't aware, that's going to be toxic, and so you've got to get rid of it. And so we sequester that into these molecules down here. So for us, that's going to be urea. For birds and insects and things like that, it's going to be this over here. For fishes, it's going to be this right here, and then we have to get rid of it. So we have to excrete it, or we have to pee it out. So fishes, because they live in water environment, they don't have to sequester it. They have to just excrete it into the environment. So they put out straight ammonia. So straight Windex is what's coming out of those guys. Clicker questions, mastering concepts. Alright, so now we're going to focus mostly on the human urinary system. And so your urinary system consists of your kidneys, which are what filter your blood, the ureters, which are these long yellow tubes right here that carry the urine that's been formed by the kidneys down into the urinary bladder, which is this guy right here, and then the urethra, which is the tube that takes urine and nitrogenous waste out of your body and into the toilet, hopefully. Or I guess if you're a boy, you could pee on the snow or something, I don't know. But it just takes the urine out of your body and then to the bush or to the snow or to the toilet or whatever it is that you're peeing on at the moment. So the functions of the urinary system include eliminating that nitrogenous waste. Again, we've got to get rid of it because it's toxic. Helping to maintain the ion concentration, so the salt concentration in your body. And then also regulating just the fluid in your body. So if you drink a lot of water, you notice you got to pee more, right? You should be drinking lots of water because the more water you put in your body, just generally the better things work. But you want to be able to get rid of that. So if you're drinking a lot of water, you have to have a way to get rid of it. And so you don't become bloated. Oops. And so the production pathway of urine starts in the kidneys. And so you can see here we've got a lot of vasculature running into the kidneys right here. All of your blood has to be filtered by the kidneys because they're what's going to pull out all that nitrogenous waste. And so those kidneys, these are like the functional units of your urinary system. So the kidneys are actually going to filter that blood. They're going to pull all the extra salt, all the extra glucose, all the extra proteins, all the extra drugs. That's why drug tests work in your urine, or drugs are detectable in your urine, and then also pull out all that nitrogenous waste. And then from there, everything else is kind of like just holding tanks and duct work. And so there's nothing else really that's doing anything except holding or passing that urine out of your body. So the kidneys are the functional unit. That's like the big guys. So you should be able to list the organs that make up the human urinary system. Remember, there's 4 main parts. Alright, so looking inside of the kidney, we can see kind of where all of the magic happens. So looking at this on the inside, you can see that there again is tons of vasculature coming into the kidneys. So you've got, whenever you see renal, that means kidneys. So whenever you see rene or renal, that's referring to your kidneys. So the renal artery is going to come in, renal vein is going to come out, and then inside of here you've got these little, what are called renal pyramids. And inside the renal pyramids, you've got little tiny itty-bitty little units that are called nephrons. And so the nephron, which you can't see on this slide right here, the nephron is actually what's doing the actual filtering. So on here, this is where we've got our nephrons. So if you look at this cross-section right here, excuse me, you can see inside here, this little yellow tubey stuff in here, that's going to be your nephron. The nephrons are what are in charge of filtering the blood at the cellular level. And so this is where you're going to be pulling your blood and the urine apart. So all of the extra salts, all the extra fluid, all the urea, all that other garbage that you don't want in your body anymore, this is where all that magic is going to happen. So in the kidney, the nephrons are the filtration units, which makes them the functional units of the kidney. So looking at this here, remember all this yellow tubey stuff is the nephron, And so here what you've got is you've got a little tiny artery that's going to go feed into this little part of the nephron right here. This little bulbous part right there is called the glomerulus, or the Bowman's capsule. It's the different words for the same thing. And here you are going to spray out, you are going to indiscriminately filter stuff out of the blood. And so what's going on here is that as the blood comes in, these capillaries, that little tuft of capillaries that's inside of the glomerulus, have little holes in them that are called fenestrations. And so this is where we are going to initially filter the blood, the actual blood cells, from all the stuff that they're floating in. And so we're going to spray out and then collect up all of those extra salts, all those extra glucose molecules, all that extra urea, all that extra fluid, and that extra stuff is going to start flowing down this tubule right here. Okay? This little tubule is called the proximal convoluted tubule. It's called proximal because it is closest to the glomerulus. Okay, proximal means close. If you think about the word proximity, that means closeness, or like distance from. So from here, now we've indiscriminately filtered. We're going to have to modify the what's actually in the contents of this urine, because at this point we just kind of sprayed everything out, and we were like, okay, anything that we might not need, we're going to just get rid of it now, and we're going to put it into the bulk of the urine. Now, while that glomerulus is indiscriminately filtering, sometimes we have to modify the bulk of that urine, because maybe we don't want to put in all that sugar. We don't want to put in all that glucose. Maybe we want to add some stuff to the bulk of that urine. And so what's going to happen is, as that basically immature urine is going to pass down, this is called the loop of Henle, or the nephron loop right here, because it goes down and then it dips up right here. You can see that on the outside of that descending limb and that ascending limb of that nephron loop, there's all these little capillaries. These are called the peritubular capillaries because it just means around the tube. So here we're actually going to modify the bulk of that urine. So we might reabsorb maybe some glucose, because maybe we don't want to get rid of all of our glucose. And so the glucose is going to go from these tubes right here back into the capillaries. Okay, just as an example. And then maybe we're like, oh, hey, we forgot to filter out some THC because somebody was smoking a little something last night. I don't know. And so instead of just keeping that in the blood, we're going to go ahead and put that into the urine. And so again, this is why urine drug tests work, is because you do drop some of those chemicals into your urine. And that happens here. And so if we are going to be reabsorbing, like maybe we put too much glucose, or maybe we put too much protein or something into our urine, and we're like, hey, I think we're going to go ahead and keep that. That's called tubular reabsorption. So it's going to go from the tube to the capillaries. We're going to put that back in the blood. And then tubular filtration is where you've got stuff that's in the blood that maybe we want to go ahead and put into the urine. So like drugs, extra salts, something like that. And so we've got our filtration happening here at the glomerulus, and then we've got our tubular filtration, so stuff going into the tubes here, or our tubular reabsorption, which is stuff that's in the tubes going back to the blood, like glucose or proteins or salts or whatever. So now our urine is becoming more and more mature. So this is getting closer to what's actually going to go into your bladder, and then you pee into the toilet or on the bushes or whatever. And so now our urine is becoming more and more modified. It's going to dip down, go back up here. Then it's going to enter this little area of tubes right here that's called the distal convoluted tubule. It's called distal because I know it's close, like right here, but in order to get here, you have to go all the way down all these squiggles, down this little line right here, and then back up here. So what that means is distal is the farthest away from the glomerulus. So distal, think distance, far away. Oh, sorry, I have to sneeze and it's like not coming. Oh, maybe it'll come later. Oh, that's so miserable. And so once we've got all that urine in the distal convoluted tubule, again, this is more mature, so we still might be adding some things, we still might be taking some things out. But once we get to these ductways right here, these collecting ducts, they're going to take the urine down into what's called the renal pelvis. And so the renal pelvis is right here. And that renal pelvis, once the urine collects there, it's going to drop it down into the ureter. And then the ureter leads right to the urinary bladder. And the bladder is just going to hold all that urine until you have time to go outside and pee on a bush, or until you have time to run to the bathroom. Oh gosh. So here's just a more up close and personal look at like the physiology of what those nephrons look like. So again, if you need some extra help, go back in here, read your book. Remember to go on YouTube and look for how to like a nephron work or something like that. Go back and watch this video again, because this is a little bit abstract the first time you see it. But remember that the parts of this are filtration, tubular reabsorption, and then tubular filtration. That's how you make urine. Oh my god, I still have to sneeze. Remember those peritubular capillaries, that's where we're going to have our tubular reabsorption. So we're going to reabsorb things back into the blood, or our tubular filtration, which is where we're putting stuff from the blood into the urine that didn't make it the first time. And so those things can be things like salt, extra water, extra urea, and other substances like drugs or whatever. And that's where they're going to move in between the blood and the nephron fluid. And so the nephron fluid is just your immature urine. Oh my god, I hope you guys do not catch my cold. It's like the worst thing ever. Alright, and again, we've got those proximal convoluted tubule, the nephron loop, and then the distal convoluted tubule. And so all of those parts together are going to take part in the tubular reabsorption and the tubular filtration. So modifying the bulk of that urine until it's ready to go down to the bladder and then get peed out all over something, right? Hopefully on the inside of a toilet. So there's your filtration. So again, here's your artery that's coming in, and then here's the outgoing arteriole. So remember, in this cap right here, this glomerulus, we're filtering kind of indiscriminately. We're going to filter that blood and just kind of spray all that stuff into the nephron here. One of the important things to note here is look at how much bigger this arteriole that's coming in is than this arteriole that's going out. If you think about a hose, if a hose started off really big and then ended really small, that's going to increase the pressure in the hose. And so increasing that pressure just helps to kind of like blow out all of that stuff that you don't want in your blood, blow it out into those tubes and into that glomerulus. And so again, here's your three processes of making urine. So you got your filtration, it's happening here. Your reabsorption, so maybe we sprayed out too much glucose, maybe too much salt or something, so we're going to reabsorb that back into the blood. And then secretion. I think I was saying filtration before, but secreting things from the blood into that tubular fluid, so that way we can modify the urine and get it to where we need it to be. So the filtration occurs at the glomerular capsule, like we talked about before. Oh, also, when you guys are doing your lab for this, put a star next to this slide, because this shows you where all the water and all of the salts and stuff kind of go into and out of those tubes. And so you can see here, like drugs, poison, H pluses are going to come out of the blood and then into the tubes. That's your secretion. And then also you've got your like sodium, your chlorine ions, that kind of thing are going to go from the tube back into the blood here. This is your tubular reabsorption, okay? So this is a really good graphic for you guys to look at. And then over here there's a little key, so you can see where the filtering is going on, where the reabsorption is going on, and where the secretion is going on. So all of that super helpful for your lab. So reabsorption, again, this is when we reabsorb things that maybe we got a little excited and we put it into the urine a little too quickly, and so we're going to reabsorb that back into the blood because we actually want to keep that stuff. And so the urine collecting ducts, those are going to lose water by osmosis. And so if you're really dehydrated, or if you have if you have too much water, this is where you're going to change the volume of your urine based on what your water looks like. So if you're really hydrated, you're going to put water into your urine. If you're really dehydrated, you're going to pull water back out. You guys are probably familiar with this, but you know the more hydrated you are, the less color your urine is going to have, and that's a good thing. The more colored your urine is, like the more yellow it is, usually is an indicator that your body is reabsorbing a lot of that water, and so it's concentrating your urine down, and so that's an indication that maybe you should drink a few more glasses of water per day. Just bang it out, like just chug some water in the morning. First thing you do in the morning, just like drink like a couple glasses of water. That'll get you going. So again, secretion is where your blood, things that maybe didn't get filtered the first time at the glomerulus, maybe still need to come out, like your poisons, toxins, drugs, all that kind of crap. Maybe if you've got too much salt, too much water, whatever, your blood is going to secrete that right into the tubules, and it's going to modify the structure of that urine, so that way when it gets to your bladder, it's ready to go. And then once we've modified that urine, we're going to collect it up in that collecting duct, which is going to take that fluid down to the renal pelvis, and then down to the bladder. And then from there, as soon as your bladder gets big enough, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I need a potty break, and you're going to run to the bathroom. So I would also put a star next to this slide and then study this. And so this is good stuff right here, knowing the functions and also the summary of how your nephrons work. This is important. Okay, so hormones also help to regulate kidney function. We talked a little bit about this a few lectures ago, but remember that you've got antidiuretic hormone, which is also called vasopressin, that regulates your kidney function. And so antidiuretic hormone helps you to retain water if you need it. And so that's what antidiuretic means. There are things that you can drink and eat that are diuretic in nature, meaning that they make you pee out all of your water. One of those things is alcohol. One of those things is caffeine. You can get diuretics at the hospital, like if you have congestive heart failure or pulmonary problems, whatever, to help you get rid of some of that excess fluid that's like sitting on your heart or your lungs. Like Lasix is a diuretic. And so antidiuretic hormone helps to counteract water loss. And so this helps you to retain water. Another hormone that kind of helps with the reabsorption of water and also with sodium, because water follows sodium, it just does, is aldosterone. And so this promotes the reabsorption of water, and then sodium, and then water is going to follow that sodium by osmosis, because water just follows the salt. That's just where it goes. And so these are some of the primary hormones that are necessary to help you maintain that fluid balance. You guys have also probably noticed, and I think I've brought this up before, if you go out and imbibe in a few too many adult beverages, which I'm sure everyone has done at least once in their life, not me because I'm perfect, you guys know, but if you drink a little too much alcohol on one night, you might notice that when you go to the bathroom, you're like, oh wow, look, my pee is totally clear, like I'm really super hydrated. So part of that is because alcohol is a diuretic, and so it interferes with how this antidiuretic hormone works. And when that happens, then you got a problem. So then you start peeing out all of your water, and then the next morning when you wake up, you're like, oh my god, I'm dying, I have such a horrible headache. It's because you're dehydrated. And if you really overdo it, you can actually upset your stomach to the point where you can't even keep water down, and so you might have to go to the hospital and get an IV if you're that hungover. So don't do that. Just have a couple beers if you're going to drink. Like, you don't have to get like totally like sloppy wasted. Not good. It's not good for your body. Alright, looks like we might be getting close to the end here. Awesome. So, okay, that was chapter 33, that how to regulate your temperature and your body fluid levels. Remember, you can always email me if you have questions about this. You guys still need to do the kidney lab. I want you guys to go ahead and do that. You can do it at home. You don't have to do it in lab. So go ahead and do that. Put that in your lab manual. If you have questions, feel free to email me or talk to me on class when you see me next. And hopefully I won't be this stuffed up and coughing next time. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.